Part 14. Esoteric Schools. Let us consider some passages where the term wine is used, both in the Old and New Testaments, in a sense that evidently cannot be literal. When, in Genesis 49:11, it is said, "He washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes shall be red with wine, and his teeth white with milk." It's fairly apparent that wine has a special meaning connected with what a man wears and how he sees. To imagine that this passage has a literal meaning is to make nonsense of it. Psychologically, what a man dresses in refers not to the literal clothing of the body, but to the clothing of the mind, to the mental beliefs and attitudes. Everyone is dressed up psychologically in opinions and viewpoints which form his mental garments, and his mental eyes view things through them. There is a description of both garments and eyes being washed in some state of insight called wine. Psychologically, a man is dressed in what he believes is true, and mentally he sees by the same means. If wine represents a particular stage in the development of the understanding of truth, the phrase eyes being red with wine refers to the state of vision belonging to it. Some very high state is indicated, a state of the development of the understanding beyond the level of water. In the Apocalypse, in the vision of the 4 horses, it is said of the black horse, "And I saw, and behold, a black horse, and he that sat thereon had a balance in his hand. And I heard a voice saying, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and the oil and the wine hurt thou not." Revelation 6:5 and 6. It can't be assumed that the wine here refers to literal wine, nor indeed the oil. At this very earthly level of thought indicated by the black horse, where a strict balance rules and everything is measured so that a man must pay strictly for what he gets, even here there is oil and wine, that is, something higher. And this must not be hurt. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, wine again appears in a significance that can be taken either literally or psychologically. In esoteric teaching, the term vineyard is often used in connection with schools of teaching that seek inner evolution. The attempts made to raise man internally, the schools formed for this purpose, are compared with vineyards from which grapes and wine, or a vintage, are expected. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is a householder which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. Matthew 21. Or, to take another illustration that shows how easily all teachings about man's inner possibilities and evolution can be distorted or fail, and he began to speak unto them in parables. A man planted a vineyard, and set out a hedge about it, and digged a pit for the winepress, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into another country. And at the season he sent to the husbandman a servant, that he might receive from the husbandman the fruits of the vineyard. And they took him, and beat him, and sent him away empty. And again he sent unto them another servant, and him they wounded in the head, and handled shamefully. And he sent another, him they killed, and many others, beating some and killing some. He had yet one, a beloved son. He sent him last unto them, saying, They will reverence my son. But those husbandmen said among themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance shall be ours. And they took him, and killed him, and cast him forth out of the vineyard. What therefore will the Lord of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the husbandman, and will give the vineyard unto others. Mark 12, 1 through 9. There have always been attempts in known history to lift man from the stage of barbarism by the dissemination of definite ideas about the deeper meaning of one's life on earth. The inner side of these endeavors is not a matter of ordinary history. All that we can read about is usually a history of the misuse and misinterpretation of the ideas when they pass into life, so that they become sources of political intrigue, greed, violence, horrible persecutions, and wars. Yet in our period, it's quite clear that if the teachings of Messiah, as given in the Sermon on the Mount alone, were followed by humanity, all wars, injustices, and social evils would at once cease, and a new world would be begun. But for this to take place, everyone would have to awaken to what he or she is really like internally. The object of a vineyard is to produce fruit and wine. A definite teaching about the means to an inner stage of development is planted as a vineyard. The prophet Jeremiah complains about the children of Israel and asks them why they want to go back to Egypt, that is, their previous state. And now what hast thou to do in the way of Egypt, to drink the waters of Sheol? Elohim, he says, broke their yoke of old time. I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands. And thou saidst, I will not serve. For upon every high hill and under every green tree thou didst bow thyself playing the harlot. Yet I had planted thee a noble vine, wholly a right seed. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? Jeremiah 2, 18 through 21. The meaning is psychological. It is obviously not literal. They are accused of returning to old beliefs, to the state called Egypt, and mixing this teaching or seed with other teachings, which is called playing the harlot. When a teaching is given, it must be kept pure until it has effected its purpose. It lasts only for a time. In every part of time, different teachings appear and last for longer or shorter periods. Their object is to lift man. They are similar in internal form, insofar as they aim at man's individual evolution through a development of the understanding and quality of his being. Each vineyard is planted to produce its particular wine. There can be no mixing of seed or ideas. This condition is expressed in some words of Moses. Thou shalt not sow thy vine with two kinds of seed. Thou shalt not plow with an ox and an ass. Thou shalt not wear a mixed stuff, wool and linen together. Deuteronomy 22:9. It is evident that these words have meaning apart from their literal sense, but they can, of course, be taken as observances to be carried out literally, and so without meaning. When a vineyard begins to die, that is, when the significance of the teaching originally planted in it is perverted or lost, it is destroyed. The Old Testament is full of destruction in this sense. Teaching constantly went wrong because people perverted it. The prophet Jeremiah laments the destruction of a school called Moab. With more than the weeping of Yazer, I will weep for thee, O vine of Shibma. Thy branches passed over the sea. They reached even to the sea of Yazer. Upon thy summer fruits and upon thy vintage, the spoiler has fallen. And gladness and joy is taken away from the fruitful field and from the land of Moab. But I have caused wine to cease from the winepresses. None shall tread without shouting. The shouting shall be no shouting. Jeremiah 48:32 and 33. This refers to a loss of teaching. The same prophet says in another place, many shepherds have destroyed my vineyard. That is 12:10. Many teachers have destroyed the original teaching. Amos describes the destruction of a teaching in this way. The multitude of your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and your olive trees hath the palmer worm devoured. Amos 4:9. 4:9. The teaching has been eaten up by wrong ideas. Sometimes the grapes are found to be sour, as in Moses' description of the vineyard of those who perverted the truth. For their wine is of the wine of Sodom, and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall. Their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the poison of dragons, and the cruel venom of the asps. Deuteronomy 32:32. This happens especially when a teaching or vineyard has become a means of worldly power and of political intrigue, as in the following prophecy about the school called Jerusalem. There shall be no grapes on the vine, no figs on the fig tree, and the leaf shall fade. Jeremiah 8:13. Many other examples could be given. What can be understood is that there has always been teaching of a certain order sown in mankind, and that always there has been a failure of such teaching in process of time. But this doesn't mean that the teaching has not, at its height, produced results. It fails in time. Or, to put it differently, it endures only a certain limited time. It's valuable to understand this because we are inclined to think that a thing should last continuously if it is real and true. But just as there are fashions of every kind, and in science or society or politics, so is the case with esoteric teaching. Yet it is not really the same because it reappears in another form, another guise, and yet in essence is always about the same object, the evolution of man. People must become more conscious first of themselves and then of others. They must forego violence as an easy solution to things. They must genuinely forgive each other, which is only possible by being conscious of themselves and what they are like and what they do. They must behave to others as they would wish others to behave to them. A very difficult thing. They must understand that their lives have another meaning, and that the nature of one's experience is not understandable in terms of things that happen on the earth. They must see the beams in their eyes before they make an unpleasant uproar about the mote in another's eye. They must cease being good for show. They must stop hatred, stop pretending, stop lying, and so on. All these ideas belong to the way of individual evolution, which esoteric teaching is always about. It is impossible to understand the history of mankind without taking into consideration the influences of esoteric teaching, from which we have gained all art and culture. Man without teaching remains barbarian. But as regards the limited extension of time of any particular example of teaching of this quality, we can cite the words of Messiah, where he warns his pupils that anti-Messiah is bound to come. Take heed that no man lead you astray, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and shall lead many astray. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for these things must needs come to pass, but the end is not yet. Matthew 24:4-6. This is the end of part 14.